All right, the first story at the top of antiwar.com today. Trump says the U.S. will take over the Gaza Strip. Absolute insanity is what this is. President Trump said on Tuesday that the U.S. would take over the Gaza Strip, a surprise announcement he made while speaking with reporters at the White House during a press conference with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Trump said, quote, "The U.S. will take over the Gaza Strip and we will do a job with it too. We'll own it and be responsible for dismantling all of the dangerous unexploded bombs and other weapons on the site, level the site and get rid of the destroyed buildings, level it out, create an economic development that will supply unlimited numbers of jobs and housing for people of the area," end quote. So the president said earlier in the day that the Palestinians must be removed from Gaza permanently. So that means this plan will involve ethnic cleansing of the territory despite strong resistance from the Arab states. And when he says people of the area, this implies that this would be the U.S. taking over Gaza and building Jewish settlements there. He was asked later in the press conference who would live in Gaza, and he said the people of the world. He said, quote, and he suggested also that some Palestinians might also be allowed to live there. He said, quote, "I think the entire world, representatives from all over the world will be there and they'll live there. Palestinians also will live there. Many people will live there," end quote. He also said that he would not rule out deploying troops to Gaza. Of course, a U.S. takeover of Gaza is going to require U.S. military action. When asked if his plan meant that he would send troops, Trump said, quote, "If it's necessary, we'll do that. We're going to take over that piece and develop it, create thousands and thousands of jobs. It will be something the entire Middle East can be very proud of," end quote. The president suggested that he had been considering the plan for a long time. He said, quote, "I see a long-term ownership position and bringing great stability to that part of the Middle East. Everybody I've spoken to, this was not a decision made lightly. Everybody loves the idea of the U.S. owning that piece of land, developing and creating thousands of jobs with something that will be magnificent in a magnificent area nobody would really know. They look and all they see is death and destruction and rubble," end quote. So Netanyahu, the press conference was really strange. Netanyahu almost seemed like he wasn't completely on board, but he did endorse the plan, saying, quote, "President Trump is taking it to a much higher level. He sees a different future for that piece of land, and that has been the focus of so much terrorism and attacks against us, so many trials and tribulations. He has a different idea, and it's worth paying attention to this. He's exploring it, and it's something that could change history," end quote. So Netanyahu says Trump is exploring it. Trump said it like he's completely made up his mind. And again, this is something he said at the top of the press conference, and then he was asked about it throughout it and was just kept saying, oh yeah, this is basically, oh yeah, this is going to happen. And of course, a U.S. takeover of Gaza would require Israel to restart its genocidal war there. And this could, the implication would be that the U.S. would be directly involved. I mean, what are they going to do? Fly B-52 bombers missions over Gaza and just completely obliterate what's left and the people that are left, to force them to leave or kill whoever stays? I mean, this is just complete madness. And, some people are saying, oh, it's just a negotiating tactic. And, maybe that's possible considering Trump's style, but I mean, this is a very reckless negotiating tactic because this could provoke Hamas into attacking Israeli troops now in Gaza. If they see this and they really think this is something that the U.S. might do, this could completely jeopardize the ceasefire. Another thing is that this kind of has distracted from everything else. Like, the big question about this meeting with Netanyahu was whether or not Netanyahu is going to get his support to not implement the second phase of the ceasefire. Even though Trump's saying all this, he's still saying that he thinks the deal, could continue. But I mean, again, this is just totally out there. And I mean, this sounds like he's committing to a U.S. invasion and occupation of Gaza. I mean, again, it's just, I saw Lindsey Graham had a quote cautioning against it. I mean, that's how out there this is. This is about as hawkish and as interventionist as you could be, and this would require the U.S. not only to aid and abet in genocide and ethnic cleansing, it would require the U.S. to directly commit genocide and ethnic cleansing. Hamas obviously would fiercely resist a U.S. takeover, and we know they've replaced a lot of their fighters. Despite Israel's mass slaughter of Palestinians, it's not like they're just going to leave. I mean, again, this is just, and it may, so many questions here. So is this what Witkoff said to Netanyahu to get him to sign the deal? Because going in during the transition period, if you listen to the show, I had no expectations that Trump would be any good when it comes to Israel. I thought things would get much worse. I was surprised by Witkoff, the Trump administration, being the one that got Netanyahu to make an agreement and to sign a deal. But has this been the plan all along? I mean, Trump makes it sound like he's been considering this for a very long time. And I know Witkoff gave Netanyahu some promises, but I mean, this is just it's just completely criminal. This whole idea. So we'll see the reaction. I mean, I've already seen the reaction, but I mean, again, the reaction from Hamas, what's going to happen from the Palestinians in Gaza, what's going to happen on the ground as a result of this. It could just really upend everything. I mean, you have these negotiations going on. This ceasefire deal, the broad strokes of it are that it's supposed to lead to an Israeli withdrawal from Gaza and reconstruction, and the people to stay there. And but here you have Trump saying the Palestinians got to go and we're going to take it over. So the next story here is it's a little redundant. I wrote this before Trump came out with the takeover thing. Trump said that Palestinians in Gaza should be removed permanently. So Trump and Netanyahu spoke with reporters before their meeting, and then they had their meeting, and then they had a big press conference after, and that's when Trump made that announcement. So, but there's just some quotes in here. Basically, Trump said, again, with Netanyahu just looking on and smiling, Trump said, quote, "You look over the decades, it's all death in Gaza. This has been happening for years. It's all death. If we can get a beautiful area to resettle people permanently in nice homes where they can be happy and not be shot and not be killed," end quote. And so he was also saying, he kept saying, oh, Gaza's hell. It's hell. It's all death and destruction. And he's sitting next to the guy who turned it into hell. And he's just sitting there smiling, looking at Trump. I mean, this is just absolutely despicable stuff here. And just the fact that this is the U.S., this is going to be funded. I mean, obviously, everything that's happened has been funded by our tax dollars. But if he goes through with this plan, this is all funded by the U.S. What kind of blowback is there going to be for this? How many American troops are going to be killed trying to put down Hamas? It's just, I mean, there's so many, your mind goes to so many places when thinking about what this really means. And again, there's the idea that this might just be Trump doing art of the deal here, but who is this? What is this going to negotiate? I mean, what could this possibly lead to? It's just, again, just completely out there. So, man, I mean, there's a lot to say about this, but we'll see what the next thing, I'm sure there's going to be reports about what the other people in the Trump administration think about this. We might learn that this was a plan they've been working on for a while. But the U.S. just completely taking it over. I mean, this is beyond anything that, the neocons, George W. Bush, any of them ever suggested the U.S. do. This is just completely on another level of intervention and imperialism. So we will see what happens. Again, it just doesn't seem, I can't imagine it in my head actually being carried out. So again, I hope it is some kind of negotiation tactic here, but it's not a good sign either way. It's either Trump really wants to take over Gaza, or he thinks this is a smart thing to say for some reason, considering everything happening in the region. I mean, if the U.S. goes for this, I mean, the Houthis in Yemen are going to start their attacks up again, of course. The Shiite militias in Iraq and, in Syria, they've lost their power a bit with the regime change, but, it could go beyond the Shiite axis attacking U.S. troops for this. It could be all the Muslim groups that start going after the U.S. for this. I mean, it's just completely reckless. So anyway, we'll see how things shake out in the coming days.